Have you ever been so absolutely still, so completely wrapped in silence and darkness, that you could hear the subtle rushing sound of your own blood? Sometimes, the most powerful light isn't the electric kind. It's a promise spoken in the dark. That is a lesson I learned again, deeply, one ordinary Tuesday night, years into the rhythm of being a mother. Our routine was a sacred, unshakable thing. Every evening, just before 8 o'clock, the house would quiet down. The sound of the dishwasher would hum its final cycle, the television downstairs would be muted, and up in the hallway, the soft golden glow from Lily's nightlight would spill across the carpet. Lily, my sweet, sensitive 6-year-old, lived her life in brilliant daylight, but she treated the dark like a predatory stranger. She needed that small plastic mushroom lamp plugged into the wall right beside her headboard, like a physical anchor tethering her to safety. If it flickered, she noticed. If its amber glow dimmed even slightly, she would call out, her voice high and worried. Tonight, she was snuggled deep beneath her dinosaur-patterned quilt, her cheek resting against the worn edge of her favorite pillow. I was sitting on the edge of the mattress, finishing the last pages of a story about a very brave fox who learned to share his berries. I loved watching her eyes get heavy, tracing the way her long, dark lashes settled onto her cheeks. The air in the room was warm and smelled faintly of lavender body wash and the comforting dustiness of old paper. This moment, this quiet closeness, was the most honest 20 minutes of my day. I read the final words, closed the book softly. The Adventures of Finley Fox was complete for the 57th time, and leaned in to kiss her forehead. "All done, sweetie," I whispered, smoothing her hair. "Time for sleeping and brave dreams." Lily yawned, a wide, satisfied little sound. Her eyes were fixed on the wall, specifically on the steadfast, unwavering point of orange light. "Mommy, you won't forget about the light, right? It has to stay on until the sun comes back." "I won't forget, my love. It's right there." I pointed to the glowing mushroom, its luminescence just enough to cast the outlines of the dresser and the window, turning the familiar room into a soft watercolor painting. I squeezed her hand. "I'm right across the hall, too." She nodded, satisfied, drawing the blanket up to her chin. I stood up, moved slowly toward the door, turning back for one last smile, and then it happened. It wasn't a slow fade, or a flicker, or a temporary dip. It was absolute, instantaneous annihilation of light. The small, familiar hum of the refrigerator that traveled up the air vents ceased. The gentle noise of the furnace fan stopped. And most critically, the steady, warm glow of the nightlight vanished, as if it had never existed. The silence that rushed in was heavy and immediate. It wasn't just the absence of noise. It felt like the absence of air pressure, thick and suffocating. The room, which seconds ago had been cozy and welcoming, became an echoing, shapeless void. Lily reacted immediately, a sharp intake of breath, followed by a panicked, small cry. "Mommy! Mommy, where are you? I can't see anything! I can't see the light!" I froze instantly, resisting the urge to fumble. I knew where the doorway was, but the sudden, total blindness was disorienting even for me. I had been standing perhaps 4 feet from the bed. I did not move toward the door. Instead, I swung immediately back toward the bed, navigating purely by the sound of her distress. "I'm right here, Lilybug," I said, keeping my voice low and completely steady, battling the instinctive quickness that fear tries to inject into your tone. I needed to be slow and absolute. My hand reached out, sweeping across the bed covers, and connected with her small, shaking arm. I slid onto the edge of the mattress again. She clung to me instantly, her small fingers digging into my pajamas. Her breath was coming in shallow, frantic bursts against my neck. She wasn't just scared of the dark. She was terrified of the unknown in the dark. the monsters and the possibilities that only a 6-year-old brain can conjure when the visual confirmation of reality is stripped away. "It's okay, darling. It's just a blackout," I murmured, pulling her close, rubbing her back in long, slow circles. "The power went out in the whole neighborhood, I think. We've still got the moon, even if the clouds are covering it for a moment." "But the light! The light is gone! Where did it go? Mommy, I can't breathe. It's too dark." Her voice was tight with tears that hadn't quite spilled yet, trapped by the intensity of the fright. I held her tighter, pressing my lips to her temple. I felt the profound responsibility of a parent in that exact moment, to be the unmoved center when the child's world spins into chaos. I knew a simple flashlight wouldn't fix this root fear. I needed to give her something deeper than illumination. I needed to give her internal certainty. I took a deep breath, inhaling the darkness and exhaling calm. I lifted my hand and intertwined my fingers perfectly with hers, squeezing gently but firmly. "Listen to me, Lily," I whispered, letting the words vibrate directly into her ear. "We are going to remember something important right now. This is a promise. Even when the light goes out, love never disappears." She sniffled, skeptical, but her frantic movement slowed slightly. "But it's scary, love. It's dark love." "No," I corrected softly. "It's strong love. It's always there love." And I am going to tell you a story right now, a true story, about a girl who learned that the strongest light she would ever know wasn't something plugged into a wall or hanging in the sky. It was her mother's voice. I adjusted my position on the bed so that I was leaning back against the headboard, pulling Lily securely into the curve of my body, her ear resting on my chest. I wanted her to feel the slow, steady rhythm of my heartbeat and to feel the physical vibrations of the story I was about to weave. "Once upon a time," I began, projecting my voice just above a whisper, making sure it was clear and resonant, a sound to hold on to. "There was a little girl named Ilara. She lived in a beautiful valley, tucked away deep in the mountains, a place so calm that the air itself felt like a hug. The people in Ilara's village lived differently than we do. They didn't have many electrical lamps, but they had one incredible thing, the whispering lantern." I paused, letting the image settle in the darkness. The whispering lantern was ancient, made of smooth, pale river stone, and it sat right in the center of their town square. And from that lantern, every night, came a light that was soft, silver, and perfectly reliable. It was not bright like the noon sun, but it was enough to see your way home, enough to read by, and most importantly, it was enough to keep the shadows friendly. Ilara, just like you, loved that light. She believed the lantern held all the safety and all the peace in the world. She would look at it every night before bed, seeing its silver glow reflecting off the snow-capped peaks surrounding the valley, and she would feel utterly safe. I shifted Lily slightly, making sure she was comfortable, her grip on my hand still tight, but no longer desperate. She was listening now, leaning into the sound. Ilara's mother, whose name was Marin, was a storyteller. She knew all the legends of the valley, and she told them often. But even Marin knew that Ilara depended heavily on the visible light. She would say, "Marin." But Marin always worried a little, because she knew that relying only on things you can see can sometimes make you blind to what you can feel. Then came the night of the great darkening. It was a fierce storm, a wind that howled like 1,000 wolves, and rain that hammered the tin roofs. Ilara was tucked into bed, watching the reliable silver glow of the lantern stream through her window pane. Suddenly, with a deep, shuddering crack of thunder, the light went out, not just dimmed, but extinguished. The great silver stone of the lantern went cold and dark, plunged into a gloom that was heavier and more profound than any ordinary night darkness. The whole village was instantly terrified. They had never, not once in living memory, seen the lantern fail. Alara screamed, just like you did, and she ran immediately to her mother's side. The difference between this darkness and the familiar night was like stepping from a warm bath into icy water. It was absolute. Alara couldn't even see the outline of her mother's face standing right next to her. "Mama!" Alara cried, clinging to Marin's skirts. "It's gone! The safety is gone! How will we find our way? How will the people know where to walk? How will the shadows stay away now?" She was trembling from head to toe, imagining the scary shapes the darkness was forming out of the furniture. Marin held her child just like I'm holding you now, Lily. She felt the fear vibrating through Alara's tiny body, and Marin knew that she couldn't light a candle fast enough to defeat this specific fear. She had to defeat the idea that light was only external. She had to show Alara where the real illumination came from. "Hush, my sweet girl," Marin said, her voice a calm river in the storm of the wind. "The light we rely on has failed, yes, but we are not lost. We are here, together. And you must listen carefully now, because I am going to remind you what is always lit, even when everything else goes dark." Alara couldn't understand. She tried to peer into the shadows, straining her eyes, trying to force them to see, but there was nothing. She thought about running to the window. Maybe the moon had appeared, but her mother's grip was steady, and her voice was magnetic. Marin began to tell the oldest story of the valley, the one about the creation of the Star River, the Milky Way, which was said to be the path the ancestors walked. She didn't shout the story. She spoke it softly, intimately, right next to Alara's ear. She described the colors of the nebulas in such vibrant detail that Alara could almost picture the swirling reds and purples of cosmic dust. She described the sound of the ancestors' laughter as they tossed tiny fragments of diamonds into the dark sky, creating the constellations. I squeezed Lily's hand again, emphasizing the rhythm. Marin kept talking, and as she talked, Alara noticed something remarkable. Even though her eyes could still see nothing, her mind was starting to paint the pictures. The steady, deep vibration of her mother's voice in the total silence was no longer just sound. It was structure. It was an unbreakable link to the truth. She felt the breath coming in and out of Marin's lungs, the rise and fall of her chest, and she knew that even though the world had gone black, the source of her safety, her mother, was absolutely present and actively creating reality through her words. Marin spoke for a long time. She told of the grumpy old mountain king who had to be convinced to share his water with the lower fields, and she imitated his deep, rumbling voice. She told of the young deer who discovered a secret grove of magical herbs, and she made small clicking noises to mimic the deer's cautious steps. With every sound, with every word, Alara was building a fortress of familiarity around herself. The darkness didn't leave. The lantern remained cold and dead in the town square, but something extraordinary happened inside Alara. She stopped pressing her face against her mother's chest in fear, and instead, she leaned back slightly, her breath becoming deep and even. She realized that while she couldn't see her mother, she could feel her voice entering her body, charting a safe course through the fear. The sound became a tangible thing, a lifeline. "Alara," Marin paused her story about the deer, her voice dropping to a gentle whisper, "do you still feel scared?" Alara thought about it. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it was now small and distant, like a buzzing insect trapped outside a window. The vast, terrifying void had been filled up completely by the colors and characters of the story. "Mama," she whispered back, "I still can't see anything, but it doesn't feel like nothing anymore. When you talk, I can see the stars, and I can see the king's huge beard. Your words are making a different kind of light." Marin smiled in the darkness, a quiet triumph for her daughter. "That's right, my love. The lantern was useful, but it was just a lamp. The true light, the strongest light, lives right here." And she gently tapped Alara's ear, "Where your heart receives the sound. The love that carries my voice to you is a light that can never be extinguished by storms or blackouts. It is warm, steady, and it tells you exactly where I am and exactly who you are. My voice is your guide. It is your strongest light." Alara asked her mother to keep talking, not because she was afraid of the dark anymore, but because she loved the feeling of the voice guiding her. She felt the story wrapping around her like a thick, warm blanket, protecting her not from the shadows outside, but from the fear inside. She learned that even when her eyes failed her, her connection to her mother, manifested as sound and story, was totally dependable. Marin continued talking, describing the subtle shift in the wind outside, the way the rain now sounded softer, like whispered promises on the window pane, until, deep into the night, Alara finally drifted into a profound and peaceful sleep, secure in the darkness, holding tightly to the hand that had just woven a universe for her. I shifted my own narrative, bringing my tone back fully to the present, focusing entirely on Lily's reaction. I felt her muscles had completely relaxed against my side. The little, shaky tremors were gone. The heavy, dead silence of the blackout still surrounded us, but now it felt different, less threatening, more like a protective layer surrounding the intimate space we occupied. "And you know what happened the next morning, Lilybug?" I asked, my voice barely a puff of air, but loud enough for her to hear perfectly. She breathed a soft, sleepy sigh against my collarbone. "What?" "The power came back on. The sun rose, and the whispering lantern in the valley square started glowing silver again. Everyone was relieved, of course, but Alara was changed. She still liked the sight of the lantern, but she wasn't reliant on it anymore. She would look at her mother and smile, knowing exactly where the truly reliable source of light was hiding. I took her hand and lifted it, pressing it gently to my own throat, right where I could feel the vibration of the words forming. "The darkness is just a lack of things to see, my darling. It is not a lack of safety. As long as you can hear me, as long as you can feel my hand, you are fully safe. My voice is your anchor, and my love is the glow that never flickers. It doesn't need batteries or electricity. It just needs us." I paused and waited. The only sound was the soft, low whistle of the wind finding a crack in the window frame, and the sound of Lily's breathing, which was now slow, deep, and utterly rhythmic. She didn't respond with words, but with a small, heavy, burrowing movement, nestling herself deeper against me. I continued to stroke her hair, tracing the smooth line of her forehead, repeating the mantra I hadn't said aloud but was sending telepathically. "I am here. I am strong. You are loved." I sat there in the velvety blackness for what felt like an hour, simply being present. The air grew a little cooler. The storm outside seemed to pass into a hushed stillness, and the simple reality settled over me. This physical act of remaining steady, of using nothing more than my voice to construct a safe space, was the most primal and crucial function of motherhood. It's not about shielding them from every dark thing, but teaching them to find the light switch within themselves, triggered by the unconditional certainty of connection. The exhaustion of the day finally claimed Lily entirely. Her grip loosened, her weight settled fully onto my thigh, and the soft, moist breath against my skin became utterly peaceful. I waited 10 minutes more, just to be sure, allowing myself to absorb the quiet of the world, feeling the powerlessness of the external darkness juxtaposed with the overwhelming power of the internal connection. Finally, very slowly, I lowered myself down onto the bed, sliding carefully so not to disturb her, pulling the blanket gently over us both. I didn't leave. I slept right there beside her, the darkness now feeling less like an enemy and more like a velvet curtain drawn around our sanctuary. I kept one arm firmly draped over her, a constant tactile reminder. The blackout lasted all night. Then, hours later, the change came. It wasn't the return of the electricity. That came later, with a soft pop and the sudden hum of the refrigerator downstairs. It was the slow, blue-gray infiltration of morning. The darkness diluted. The edges of the window frame emerged, crisp and defined, and then the gentle, soft-focus light of the early sun began to fill the room, painting the familiar outlines of the dresser and the dinosaur quilt. Lily blinked awake slowly, adjusting her eyes to the daylight streaming in. She stretched, yawned, and turned her head to look at me, her eyes wide and clear. She was no longer afraid. The terror of the night was replaced by the simple, glorious reality of the sun. She sat up, rubbing her sleepy eyes, and noticed the nightlight was now glowing again, its little mushroom head shining orange. It was the familiar beacon of safety that had always been there, but she didn't focus on it. Instead, she looked right at my face, leaning in close, her expression serious and profoundly knowing. "Mom," she said, her voice husky with sleep and truth. "The light came back on downstairs, but I'm glad you didn't need it last night." I smiled. "Why is that, honey?" She reached up, took my face in her small hands, and gave me a kiss, a gesture full of the wisdom she had gained in the dark. "Because, Mom," she said, her smile wide and honest, the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "You're my nightlight." She understood. She understood that the comfort, hope, and reassurance we need most in life isn't always something we can plug into the wall. It's the unconditional voice of love that creates a safe space in the darkness, the simple human connection that becomes our most reliable illumination. When the power fails and the whole world goes silent, the sound of your trusted heartbeat and the familiar, steady voice of someone who loves you is all the light you truly need to find your way. It is a promise that never breaks. And that is a story worth sharing. If you have ever felt that deep comfort from a loved one's voice during a difficult time, or if this story resonated with the simple, powerful love between a parent and child, please share this video with someone who might need a reminder that even when the darkness feels absolute, the love around them never disappears. Tell me in the comments, who is your strongest light? Let's light up this feed with those promises.